associated with the Sufi orders. The Sufis stress the personal dimension of the relationship between Allah and man. They emphasize rituals and devotional practices such as recitation of Quran, music to attain spiritual meditation, acts of devotion, retreats as fasting as techniques to get closer to God. Their leader offers a mystic path to the believer that is more personal. One invaluable innovation these Muslims brought, which would later be important to the Muslims of the New World, was literacy. Islam emphasizes literacies. Through Muhammad himself could not read or write, and the Quran is very explicit about need to study. Wherever Islam spread, encouragement was given to the learning of Arabic and to the foundation of both small schools for teaching the reading of the Quran and higher schools for deeper study. Before I continue the reading, I would like to tell everybody the purpose of the study before we go any further. Popular beliefs portray African slaves, African that was taken from here to New York as people that were not literate. Okay, but it was not the case because over here in Senegal in 1601, we already had a university called the University of Pire. And it is not a well-known university and we should talk about it. Okay, we had also Timbuktu founded in 939 over here. And people that was taken from Africa to America were people that were already literated before to be taken from here to America. And what's important is there was a big difference between African Muslims, African that was taken, Muslims. There was a difference between Muslim slaves and other slaves because they were already literated because they were Muslims. Okay, if somebody is said to be a Muslim, that one already emphasize, that one already know how to read and write in a language. Okay, if somebody knows to read and to write in a language, you cannot say that he is not literated because it is considered to be literated nowadays just people that can learn and write in Arabic, which is not people that can learn and write in French or English, which is not the case. Because, let me see. Okay, in this last part of the introduction, I said, popular beliefs have portrayed African slaves as ignorant peasants for almost 400 years. Literacy for Blacks in the America is widely thought to be developed after emancipation. However, between the early 16th and 19th century, large numbers of slaves were literate. They were Muslims and could read and write in Arabic. And probably hundreds of thousands among them had pursued higher studies. When the first Africans were deported to New York, Islam had already spread in Africa. Okay, in West Africa for 500 years. Literacy in Arabic is essential in Islam because the believers rely on Quran to understand the religion, to guide them in their daily life, to provide them with the right prayers for different circumstances, and to instruct them on all legal matters and proper social and personal behavior. Therefore, wherever Islam goes, a widespread educational system of Quranic school is always put in place. The number of schools dotting the West African landscape attracted the attention of several European travelers who complimented it favorably to what was the reality in their own countries. where the masses were kept the masses were kept illiterate. The circumstances of higher Quranic studies included grammar, philosophy, jurisprudence, law, theology, numerology, and astronomy. With the advent of the Atlantic slave trade, large number of Muslims were turned away from their families and intellectual world and forced to spend a lifetime of manual labor on the American plantation. I have divided my work into 6 parts. First, I have started to talk about literacy before and during enslavement. That was the first part. The second part, early literacy in Africa before slavery. Okay. The third part, preserving literacy in the New World. If you have read the book of Sylviane Diouf, Servants of Allah, she said that Muslims that were taken to America had means to preserve their culture, because what they brought with them, the literacy that they brought with them, could not vanish. They tried to keep it. Okay. Later on, you can have literacy as a threat. Literacy as a threat. Literacy as a distinction. Literacy and communication among Muslims. After you get literacy and freedom. Another part before the conclusion, literate Muslims and revolts, because we have sources that showed us that literate Muslims contributed a lot to the revolt of Bahia in Brazil, in Brasilia. Okay, let me jump into. Okay. The first part, early literacy in Africa before slavery. If you have taken the example of Kunta Kinte were literated before to be taken to America. He already mastered reading and writing in Arabic. Okay, and once he got to America, he was trying to preserve that historical thing, that culture he had. Okay, through Kunta Kinte in Alex Haley's Roots, we can see that they were able to read and write in Arabic before deportation. The Moro was the highest grade of teacher in the Gambia. Indeed, there were only a few of them, and so wise were they after many reigns of study that their job was to teach not schoolboys but other teachers, such as the Arfan of Jufour. Okay, the Arfan is a teacher also. He went to a Quranic school and finished his study in an early age before to be taken to the new world of a slave. Okay, after Islam emphasizes literacy through Muhammad, etc. I have already said it. As Sylviane Diouf stresses, literacy in Arabic is of primary importance in Islam because believers rely on Quran not only to understand the religion, but also to guide them into their daily life. Okay, that was the main idea of the first part. All right, before I jump to the second part, do you have some questions so I can see how I can answer? Okay, I can go on. All right. Almost half of century later, a Muslim slave in American South by the name of Lamine Kebe would reinforce Park's observation about the widespread availability of schooling in West Africa. Okay, Lamine Kebe had related that in Africa, where himself had taught as a schoolmaster for 4 years. All the children have the mean of instruction in basic reading and writing that was provided gratuitously from government funds. Instruction of his sort entailed teaching peoples how to sound out of Arabic letters and copy the words of Quran. At the very beginning of these studies, students probably did not know the meaning of the words they were reading, but they were learning how to read and write Arabic and copy the shapes they saw on the page of their manuscripts. Those who took advantage of the schooling system in Muslim West Africa became familiar with the Arabic alphabet and developed literacy skills from there. Okay, the Muslim slaves discussed how far surpassed his rudimentary level in their literacy of the servant slave to who appear most frequently in the historical record. Okay, there are Muslims that have written some narratives. The most popular of them, I hope you know Umar ibn Said. Umar ibn Said was taken from a battle between the Bambara and the Pearls. And he was sold as a slave, and he died after 9 years of living in America as a slave. He has written 14 manuscripts. 14 manuscripts. If you click on internet, you go to the page of the Library of Congress, you can see the manuscripts. Okay. We have also Abu Bakr Sadiq, we have Lamin Kebe, Ben Johnson, Suleiman Ayuba Diallo. Okay, Suleiman Ayuba Diallo. The first slave who has written a letter, who have returned back to Africa. Suleiman Ayuba Diallo. Okay, if I go back to the settlement of literacy in Africa, I will talk about Timbuktu again. The city of Timbuktu had the most universities in any nation. Okay, it was the proof at the talents, creativity, and ingenuity of the African people. One of the impacts of the growing trans-Saharan trade was the spread of Arabic as a written language in Africa. Arabic became not only a language of faith and religious scholarship, with the many malams, sheriffs, and others who came to the religion, it was also a language of government and law. The many manuscripts now housed in Ahmed Baba Institute in Timbuktu are testament to the spread of literacy in West Africa from an early time, and certainly it had become important by the 30th century. Rules of important West African empires such as Mali and Songhai, of course, maintained existing indigenous frameworks of rulership. However, they borrowed Islamic bureaucratic forms, religion, scholarship, and legal structure to govern the new states. Okay, it is said that here in Timbuktu, Arabic wasn't a simple language because people could use Arabic to communicate, to make easier the trade between Arabs and black people. And they were not learning in Timbuktu only a language. They were learning philosophy, theology, jurisprudence, and so on. Okay. Emerging from the ruins of the Mali Empire, Okay, the Songhai Empire, majority of the population still practiced their traditional belief system, etc. Okay. Here you can see a picture of Timbuktu early in the beginning. Okay. All right. Timbuktu. Okay. In Timbuktu, students were taught not just reading and writing, but mathematics, astronomy, and neighboring languages as well. Most importantly, South as Dwight related from his conversation with Kebe. Okay, those informations were given to a white man by Kebe. Lamin Kebe, the slave okay, I can't even say a slave. He was enslaved. Okay, an enslaved black. He was the imam over here in Africa, in Nigeria exactly, before to be taken in America. Okay. There are many judges, doctors, and clerics here, all receiving good salaries from King Askia Muhammad of the state of Songhai. He pays great respect to men of learning. There is a great demand of books, and more profit it made from the trade in books than from any other line of business. Okay, Lamin Kebe said that the Askia was paying a great salary to those who were literate. My computer is a little bit slow. D'accord.
Très intéressant. Oui, mais je l'ai dit, il va vous expliquer. Ça ne peut pas être un sujet. Vous faites plusieurs blocs qui arrivent à quoi il faut ramasser ça. Il y a des choses qui ne sont pas à être là-dedans. Il comprend, il va discuter avec vous. Mais ce sujet-là, si le professeur Boubacar Bari était beaucoup moins âgé, j'allais dire d'essayer de le rencontrer. Parce que ce sujet-là l'intéresse. Il en parle très souvent. Hein? Ou bien alors, à partir de janvier, je crois que le professeur Wendy Wilson Fall, qui est ancienne directrice et qui est à Lafayette, elle connaît un brin sur ce sujet-là. Il faut vous mettre en rapport avec Marianne ou Abdoulaye. Comme ça, quand elle viendra, vous pourrez la rencontrer pour discuter. Voilà. Oui, mais vous discutez avec lui, moi je voudrais tout simplement vous dire.
All right.
Well, you can carry on with your presentation.
Okay, another important point, preserving literacy in the New World. How African Muslims try to preserve their literacy in America. The Muslims had arrived with the knowledge that they had patiently acquired when sitting cross-legged around a bonfire, their wooden tablet on their knees, they traced day after day the letters and the word that from the Quran. Children, fresh from their first year in school, teachers, ulama, culturate, marabu, the slave trade did not spare anyone. Some Muslims could write perfect Arabic as well as Hausa, Wolof, or Mandinko. Others had been stopped in their tracks and possessed only a few rudiments of the written word and a clumsy calligraphy. There were many degrees of knowledge among the African brought to the New World. And since no universal definition of literacy exists, the one used throughout this study is the basic knowledge of reading and writing. Whatever the level of their reading and writing skills, the African had to face the problem of how to preserve them. Without books, without schools, teachers, paper, pen, and ink, it is particularly difficult to keep one's ability to read and write. It was difficult for Muslim slaves to acquire the tools they needed to retain their literacy. Okay, oops. It was difficult for the Muslim slave to acquire the tools they needed to retain their literacy. The priest who translated his autobiography explained that Abu Bakr al-Sadiq told, couldn't scarcely have completed his 15 years when taken away from Africa, was 2 years in the West Indies before he could obtain the use of a pen, ink, and paper. And with the exception of 2 or 3 Negroes, one fortunately on board, the slaver which carried him off had no means of reviving his remembrance of what he had learned till a very late period. Nevertheless, Abu Bakr preserved his literacy and used it to improve his situation. Many Muslims had come literate to the New World, and that the conservation of their knowledge was difficult endeavor. The obstacle, he stressed, some succeed in doing so. Brian Edward exploit a Mandinko domestic in Jamaica who could write with great beauty and exactness the Arabic alphabet and some passage from the Quran, according to Edward. The advantage possessed by a few of these people of being able to read and write is a circumstance on which the Mandinko Negroes in West Indies pride themselves. Among the rest of the slaves over whom they consider that they possess a marked superiority. Okay, in this part, George Greenwood wanted to explain that literate Muslims in America was pride of themselves, and that caused a diversity between them and the other slaves because they consider it that they were more intelligent than the others. Okay, this is a passage of Sylvian. Sylvian Diouf, in Servants of Allah, said, Quranic teaching was also alive in Lima, Peru, where the Mandinko scholar, the traveler, the man of Africa, observed a French traveler, forgotten an original version of the Quran or the Bible. But evidence of the existence of structured Quranic schools in other parts of the New World is lacking. Nevertheless, that literacy is essential in Islam and that there was a concentration of Muslim schools in the American justifies extrapolating from Brazilian experience and asserting that such schools were most likely operating in places where the Muslim community was large and organized enough. Some Quranic education was probably provided to neophytes or to Muslims willing to perfect their knowledge in place, such as Trinidad, Saint-Domingue, and Jamaica. Okay, in this passage, she wants to say that probably we could have schools, Muslim schools in America during slavery, in such places as Trinidad, Saint-Domingue, and Jamaica, where the community was not extensive. A Marabu may have shared his knowledge with a few students in an informal setting, as is customary in Africa in any event. The presence of Muslim schools had to be kept a secret. The existence of those schools were a secret among Muslims. And only in unusual circumstances, such as the failed uprising in Bahia, the revolt of Bahia, would their existence have come to light. Only after the revolt of Bahia that people knew that they could have schools in places like Trinidad and Jamaica and Saint-Domingue. The establishment of Quranic schools on the American continent during slavery was quite an accomplishment. On a practical level, it required the pooling of resources to buy books and other supplies. It entailed establishing networks that extended overseas into Africa and Europe. It demanded a good collaboration between slaves and freedmen, whose rooms or houses were used as school rooms. Another figure, Omar ibn Said, was an educated Muslim African born in 1770 in Fouta Toro, modern Senegal, captured at the age of 37 and brought to South Carolina to be sold. He remained enslaved until his death in 1864. Perhaps 10% of the enslaved African transported to the Americas were Muslims. Also, Umar converted to Christianity in 1821, but there is many problem because some say that he converted to Christianity, but there is some people who disagree. Okay. And later, scholars conclude that he maintained his Muslim faith. Okay, it's very paradoxical. Some say that he converted in 1821, but some others say that he maintained his Muslim faith throughout his life. For while he encouraged other Muslim Africans to convert, he also included Muslim prayers and texts in his writing. Okay, I have told you that he had written 14 manuscripts. As in his 1821 autobiography written in Arabic and translated into English, which begins with memorized passage from Quran scholarship on Umar ibn Said's life and writing has reflected the macro-historical trend in the historiography of slavery. And some of the more recent speculation about Umar and character borders on the saccharine For example, Ala El-Rais writes that Umar was a pious and peaceful man speaking for himself. Umar writes that he used to join the jihad every year against the infidels, non-believers, he wants to say, which could also refer to lax Muslims. And as Muslim Pulo, Umar ibn Said probably would have taken them as slaves, sold them into slavery, or forced them to convert to Islam. When Umar was a child, he reports his family owned around 70 slave studies of Umar life and writing like Al-Rais. Al-Rais, he's an author who wrote the autobiography of Umar ibn Said. Usman's and Forbes. Okay. Umar's Arabic was rudimentary, and I suspected it was difficult, if not impossible, for him to convey subtle anti-slavery utterance in his text, given his poor command of classic Arabic. One of the sticking points these recent scholars have come across is Umar's apparently pro-slavery position. They have selectively interpreted his texts, claiming that through his strange language, he was decrying the institution of slavery. Okay, that was the second part. But here is a picture of him. Okay. Another literate slave, Abu Bakr al-Sadiq, born in 1794 in Timbuktu, Abu Bakr was named after the first caliph who was the closest friend of the Prophet Muhammad. He was the son of a prosperous family in Mandinko, present-day Ghana, and was captured at the age of 13 and then sold into slavery. When he was captured, his clothes were torn and he was tied up with ropes. He was sold several times as he was moved from town to town until he was sold to Christians on a ship headed on Jamaica. A part of his enslavement, plantation owners in Jamaica changed his name and forced him to undergo baptism to Christianity. Through privately, he remained true to the religion and language of his birth. In his autobiography, he wrote, "Though whatsoever he wills." Okay, it's a very difficult pronunciation because he wrote these words the way slaves pronounce them. No one can aside which he uttered, nor can anyone withhold that which he had given. Old language. As God the Almighty has said, nothing can befall us unless it be written for his, between brackets, his book. He is our master in God, therefore, let all the faithful put their trust. This quote from Abu Bakr's autobiography shows his complete truth in God. He completely
you can take 5 more minutes to wrap up so that we can start the setup. We will have about 45 minutes for the questions and exchanges.
Il y a une dernière partie ici. Je vais voir le professeur Ndongo, parce que c'est lui qui m'avait suggéré ça. Genre, je devais créer un lien entre l'alphabétisation des esclaves et les trucs comme The Nation of Islam, les Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X, Louis Farrakhan, etc.
So I think we can open the set of questions, open the floor for people who would like to contribute or ask questions. I think you cannot go deep down into the details for now. It will take too long. So what is important here is how we can help you structure your ideas. The ideas are here for sure. So how we can help you structure your ideas. The professor Swanson, who entered the room a while ago, just told you how wide your topic is. The wording was too wide. So I think that is the idea. Okay, we understand that you want to deal with enslaved West African enslaved Muslims. Okay, so how you can organize your work. Okay, how far along are you, and what are your challenges and difficulties that you are facing, and how we can help you, be able to finish your research project. That is, I think, what is really important. So I would like to give the floor to people who would like to contribute, who would like to ask questions or give his or her contributions. The floor is open. You can raise your hands if you want to participate and ask questions or bring in your contributions. All right, I think that I might start. All right, so I do think that the topic is very interesting. It is very interesting, and it is something which is also very important because it is also part of our common history between Africa, West Africa, to be more accurate, and America, the US, and that history of people taken from Africa to America and who were already Muslims. It is you mentioned the city of Pir. I was born in Pir. I moved in Dakar when I was 7 years old in 1993. My father was born in Pir, and the one who founded the University of Pir, Khali Amar Far, is one of my ancestors. So it is a very interesting history, and you're right. It was early in the 17th century, early in the years 1601, 5, 6, 10, where we had the first university and where we had also the first mosque built in Senegal. So it is very important to know that history and to know that at that time when slavery was in full swing, we had slaves, we had Africans who were already literate, but in Arabic. Yeah, because they were Muslims. They were able to learn their religion, to learn the Arabic language, and to read and write manuscripts, books, and to convey their own history. So it is very important. Now, I think the problem is, where do you want to put the stress on? Do you want to put the stress on the history, or do you want to put the stress on some works? Like, for example, when you take the history or the case of Omar ibn Said, who wrote 14 manuscripts, and those are available, as you said it, in the library of the Congress. Okay, so I think the time period is very long. Okay, so the main difficulty you are going to have at first is how to let's say organize and structure your work in a time period and put the focus where you won't get distracted, okay, or that will, so that you can really, you know, not have a time period which is too long, up to the point when you will just have to, you know, deal with this and then deal with that without being really able to take the whole and to consider the whole. So what is your time period of your work, first of all? What is the time period? 3 parts.
Okay, before slavery, I studied at
Yes.
okay, after during slavery, after slavery, because after slavery we have the legacy of the slaves. Okay, if I want to study the literacy of slaves, I should study first how African people that were taken over there were living before they were taken.
Yes.
That's important.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Okay. I think after you'll be able to answer that question. Okay. Okay. So you can take you can jot down notes for the questions, and then he'll be able to answer the questions. Yes.
Okay, time period first.
All right. All right. So you can get down the notes for the questions. So first of all, my first concern is with the time period you will have to deal with. Okay, before slavery, during slavery, and you even mentioned an idea that Professor Ndongo gave you, which was also to make that correlation with contemporary American Muslims, like the Nation of Islam, with people like Elijah Muhammad. You see, so if you want to take it from before slavery up to the years 1960s up to now, I think it will be it might be too long. It might be a problem. So where you exactly want to put the stress? Okay, where exactly you want to put the stress? First of all, I think it is very important to help you be able to. All right. And also you mentioned, okay, you mentioned very important works like Sylvia and Jules, The Servants of Allah. And also I think you have read the book, what is the book by Usman Khan, Beyond Timbuktu. You talked about Timbuktu Beyond Borders. But yes, you also have Beyond Timbuktu by Usman Khan. Yes, you can jot it down. I think the book is available here at WARC. I think he is teaching Islamic studies in Colombia. Yes. I think it is also another important work that you can, because in his work also he was talking about pretty much the same issues, but focusing more on Africa at that time. Okay, so in the meantime, I will give the floor to Sally Job, who has a question, and you will jot down notes. And after you answer those questions, before we can move further. All right, Sally, you have the floor.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Njai, for giving me the floor. Congratulations to Mr. Ndongo, maybe my future friend, because we haven't had the chance to exchange for the time being, but we will do it soon.
Sally, we cannot hear you. Are you?
You cannot hear me?
Sally, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Sally, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you, but can you hear me?
All right, Sally. So I think Bakar is saying that they can hear you on the Zoom. So let us try to fix the problem. All right.
Hello, can you hear me? Oh.
Sally, we can hear you on the Zoom. I think they have a problem connecting the Zoom and the microphone they have.
Sally, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Yes, we can hear you now. Thank you very much.
Great, wonderful, wonderful, great.
Okay, you can go on.
Okay, great, great. Thanks, Dr. Njai, for giving me the floor. All my congratulations to my brother Ndongo. I am Saliu Diop, a PhD student. We're sharing the same labo and the same supervisor. I think we will have the chance after to exchange a lot. These are one of the reasons why these atmospheres have been set up so that we can exchange in the labo. That's always very interesting. Your topic is very interesting, and I think everybody will have the same concern. The topic is absolutely very interesting. And Professor Usman Sen, with his great experience, also studied with something interesting with the topic itself, the way you shaped the topic. And I think you jotted it down, and that will help you a lot. I want to have just some comments before maybe asking a question while finishing. But the first thing is you mentioned Timbuktu, central place, an intellectual, spiritual, and cultural place in Africa, and with a great history. I don't know if you know Professor Patejan, Doyen Patejan. He had, I don't know if the publishing house still exists, a publishing house entitled Les Éditions Sankore. And as you know, in Timbuktu, Sankore was actually the university. Yeah, you had so many centers, study centers in Timbuktu back in the days, but Sankore was the biggest university. I mean, it was the cornerstone. And Doyen Patejan also did a very interesting work on that. And in 1982, he invited Professor Shakanta Diop while presenting that publishing house at the university in the law faculty, in what we call the Colloque de Dakar back in the days. That was very, very interesting, a very, let us say, interesting moment in the history, in the intellectual history of the university. So you can see there with Professor Patejan that that can be very interesting. Another comment also is related to Professor Ousmane Kane. Dr. Njai mentioned it. For me, c'est un incontournable, as we are used to saying. Beyond Timbuktu, an intellectual and cultural history. A very, very interesting book. And another book also of Professor Ousmane Kane, that is entitled Les Intellectuels non neurophones. And that book is essential. And I'm sure my friend, my good friend, Dr. Faye Babakar also loves this book, because this book is is based on decentering between bracket knowledge, because what he calls les intellectual europhone, who thinks that whatever is related to knowledge should come from Europe, and he entitles his book Les Intellectuels Non Europhone, and that is a very interesting book. And in that book that Dr. Njai mentioned, Beyond Timbuktu, he did a very interesting book in the intellectual and cultural knowledge in history in Timbuktu. Professor Usman Khan, yeah, he is teaching at Harvard University. He is actually Professor Mamadou Diouf, who is teaching at Columbia. And Professor Usman Khan is teaching at Harvard. And il est titulaire de la chaire Al-Walid. I mean,
Al-Walid Mental.
Harvard, I mean, he is gorgeous. Usman Khan is a great scholar, and he is used to coming at work every year. So you can have the chance also to meet him. Professor Dr. Njai is absolutely right. And that reference is really interesting. Apart from Professor Usman Khan also, we had the chance a month or 2 months ago to attend a webinar which was organized by Eureka and was hosted by Dr. Fai Babakar. I think after you do your best to get in touch with Dr. Fai, who's online, Babakar, he can provide with a lot of information. And Eureka with Babakar Fai, Dr. Fai, they invited Professor Falungom. Professor Falungom, he is a professor of anthropology and teaching at Boston University. He is a great scholar. And he did a great work on the grassroots, and he wrote a book entitled Islam and Grassroots in Africa. And also he's working on the Ajami. I don't know if you mentioned it, maybe I did not hear, the Ajami sources, les sources Ajami, because it is a new, not a new, but a kind of different handwritings that are different from Arabic, but were inspired by Arabic handwritings. And very interesting. You have a very broad literature produced and published in Ajami. And actually, Professor Falun and Professor Usman Khan are working on that. So Dr. Fai Babakar, who's online, invited him a month ago. And even our supervisor, Professor Ndongo, was online, and he did a very good contribution. He brought a good contribution. So do that. There's also another professor, another Senegalese, who's Mbailo, Professor Mbailo, who's teaching at Duke University. And Mbailo also is a great scholar, and he was the director of the Duke Islamic Center. He directed this World Humanity, this center, and also he did a great job. I'm sure also you can see how you can read his books and get in touch with him. That would be interesting. Suleiman Bashir Diagne also, Beyond Timbuktu, he directed a book, Suleiman Bashir Diagne and Shamil Jepi, on Timbuktu, and that was also a very interesting book. Whenever we talk about Islam, of course, Bashir is going to called, because he also did a very interesting job in the history of the intellectual Islamic heritage. So these were the different points I wanted to raise, the different comments I wanted to share with you. Maybe a question, because you said something very interesting at the very beginning, saying that Muslim, because they need to know their religion, because they need to practice, because Islam, apart from being a spirituality, it is also a sociology, between brackets. I mean, Islam gives ways and means that explain how we live and how we should live, how we should behave, apart from the spirituality, which is a vertical relationship between God himself and the believer. So on the second part, which is about socialism that Islam provides with explains. You said that we need, I mean, believers, Muslims, they need to read, or they read and write. So it means that this is all about being literacy. This is about literacy. So the question I would like to ask is, there is also another situation. Sometimes people do not read, they do not write, but they memorize. It is something that exists in Islam. Sometimes you can see somebody who can recite the whole, I mean, Holy Quran, from Baqarah to Nas, as we are saying, but he cannot read and he cannot write. I mean, he is just memorizing. So this part of people, this also, it is not a question directed to you directly, maybe to me and to everybody. So this portion of this part of the people, the believers, can we, if I take into account your quotation, can we take them into that literacy between brackets, because you define it in a very, very, very interesting and very clear way. Yeah, this is a question I wanted to raise for myself, for you, and for everybody. So thank you very much one more time, and congratulations for being here, sharing. As a PhD student, I know that it is not easy to be facing Dr. Njai with his great knowledge, but they are always here to support, to help, and that's really very interesting. So thank you one more time. Thank you, Dr. Njai.
Thank you very much, Sayu. Thank you for those questions. And I think Babakar Fai is also online, Dr. Fai, and he said at some point that he wanted to share some documents with you. Maybe he has a question for you before we can move on. Dr. Fai, do you want to contribute or ask questions?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sure.
Yes.
I don't have a question. Thank you very much for giving me the floor, and congratulations to our brother Ndao for having presented something interesting. So I love the presentation, and I don't have a specific question. I think Salu said it all. Salu gave the main information that our brother need to peruse. So I just need to get in contact with him. If I could have his email, I could definitely share documentation and PDF and books on this very subjects. Yeah. So thank you so much, brother Ablan. And again, thanks so much for organizing this program. It's very important. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Thank you, Dr. Fai. All right. So after I will share your contact with him and with people who would like to get in touch with you. Okay. So I think you can answer these questions first before we move on.
Okay. If I summarize, the question is, if those who just memorized are part of the literate people. Okay. I don't think they are part of those who we can call literate people. Because on my point of view, somebody literate is someone who can read and write in a language. Okay, that was my answer to that question. A literate person is somebody who can read and write in a language. Then if you cannot read nor write in a language, I can't call you somebody literate. That's my point of view. All right, because when I mentioned Timbuktu, I was saying that people who were there could read and write. I didn't say that some of them only memorized the verses from the Quran. What they were learning over there were not just the Quran, but philosophy, mathematics, and so on. Okay.
Yes, may I?
Yeah.
I think Salu was talking mostly in our context. In our country, we see that many people, it's like here, when you start speaking, the first thing you will do is to take it to the Arabic school, to the Quranic school, to be more precise. Okay. And most of the time when you are very young, people who are going to teach you the Quran, they put the stress only on memorizing. You have to commit to your heart at first. And that's the reason why we see in Senegal some people who are able to memorize some, let's say, some verses or many verses or surahs, but they don't understand anything. I think that's his point. Can we call those people literate people or illiterate people, or are only people who can read, write, and understand and memorize literate people?
Okay, on my point of view, people who can read and write only can be called literate people. That's what I understand. Because if you can just memorize, can you practice mathematics? Can you be if you can't write, how can you practice philosophy and other subjects, other part of knowledge? Those who just memorize in Senegal, what are they learning? Are they learning philosophy? Are they learning other types of knowledge? They are just memorizing one thing, Quran. That's the thing.
Interesting. It is. I think it is interesting, and it gets us back to the first words of the Quran. How can we understand it? How is it translated? When people say "Iqra," for example, learn. So what should we learn as Muslims? What should we learn? Just memorize or try to understand? Okay. So I think it is a debate, something which is very important, because in the Quran it says if you don't know God, you won't understand how to worship God. And maybe the issue we're having right now in the world, like jihad, and the difference in terms of understanding, okay, maybe also it stems from that. Okay, what is the message? What is the true message conveyed in the Quran? Are people who are being used to fight those battles or worlds Muslims who are not really literate? Is it the reason why they are making those mistakes? Is it the reason why they have taken that path? I think when you talk about literacy, I think it is very important for a Muslim. Okay, I think it is a very important question. Maybe you don't have time to focus too much on it, but it's a very important question. All right. So do you, is there another question I think you have had many suggestions. I think the work by Usman Khan, he's right. I think he was in Columbia first, and then he went to Harvard. Now he's in Harvard. He's also he's a fellow of the Al Walid bin Talal, I think, scholarship or foundation. And he's also used to giving some lectures here or conferences. I remember 2 years ago, I attended a conference he gave at the museum. It was very important regarding the Hajj, etc., how it is done in the world by Muslims, the history of the Hajj. So he's a very important scholar. And since he dealt with Timbuktu, beyond Timbuktu, the University of Timbuktu, how knowledge was being taught in Timbuktu, I think he's a must-read. Okay, he's a must-read. And the other professors, that he mentioned, Sally mentioned, Professor Falungom, Professor Bailo, Sulaiman Bashir. Yes, Sulaiman Bashir also is very involved in those issues. Yes, Rawan Bay, yes, who was in charge of the of the Hajj for a very long time. Okay. So how about my question regarding the scope of your work in terms of structure and organization?
All right. I told you that I plan to divide the work into 3 parts. The first part, I will study how Africa was before slavery. How Africa was before slavery. Schools that have been here, like Timbuktu, Pir, and other schools, maybe I will dig deeper later. Okay. After that, the second part, I will see how literate Muslims try to preserve their literacy. Okay, because there is another part over here, literacy and freedom. It's part of the work also. Okay, the first part in Africa before slavery. Okay, how did they use literacy during slavery? And what's the legacy of literate Muslims after slavery? Okay, that's the plan.
Okay, if I may, I think the reason why I'm asking this question is when we talk about West African enslaved Muslims, we know that before the slavery, which is better known as being the transatlantic slavery, slave trade. We know that, as you said, with Umar ibn Said, he used to go to and do jihad, and you mentioned at some point that he or his family used to own slaves. Okay, so slavery was already practiced by some other people. Okay, so it might be very wide. See, so I think that you have to define a time period in your title. It's like in literature, I think it is a point that will be raised by your supervisors, by your in the jury for your thesis. In literature, we don't have the same issue because for each book we have a date of publication. Okay, so you have the context. But for civilization, it is a very important aspect, the time frame. We say West African enslaved Muslims, it might, let's say, take into account a very long period. And if you have centuries that you have to go through, it might be very difficult for you to do. So what do you want to put the stress on? Okay, I think once again, I would like you to tell us exactly what you want to put the stress on, or so far, what have you put the stress on? I know that you've dealt with the story of the history of Omar ibn Said, Timbuktu, Pir, etc. And so what do you want to put the stress on? In terms of approach, you want to deal more with literacy, right? Yes.
I think I will put the stress on literacy. Okay.
Yes, once again, for a thesis, we always say that it is a project. So the title might be temporary. Okay, you can always at some point reword or improve how you phrase or how you word your title. You can change direction at some point. What is important is to have a project. I mean, through your research, you are going to find out things, because that's what research is about. Okay, trying to find out. Okay, you have a project and you do your research, and when you do your research, you come up with many information. Now, how can you organize them so as to have a PhD research paper which is well structured and organized? So it is very important. You understand? So what have you found out so far, and how can you try to structure it into a PhD dissertation? I think it is very important, and I think it is your product. That's why with the first title you gave us, we all felt like it was very interesting. The idea is here, but in terms of organization or framing, it was a little bit problematic. Do you understand? So I think it is the main issue, and I think that we we can all try to help you do it, you know, with the exchanges. And the idea is for us to enable students, PhD students, to present their works, okay? And exchanges will go on even after this session, okay? We will be able to exchange with you. You'll be able to exchange also with people who will bargain to give you some documents or give you ideas or help you better organize your work, okay? But you need to understand where you want to put the stress on. I think it is very important. So do we have other questions or suggestions for Ndongo? You can raise your hand if you want to ask a question or bring in a contribution. We have 10 minutes left. All right, Ndongo, how many pages do you have so far?
So far, I have got 79 pages. 79 pages.
And your work is divided into 3 parts or 3.
The work is divided into 3 parts.
The titles of those parts.
Okay, just a type. Oh. Okay, we have study of literacy before and during slavery. Okay, that was the first part. The second part, literacy as a threat. Study of literacy before and during slavery. Okay, in that first part, we have two other parts inside. The second one, literacy as a threat. Mm-hmm. The advantages of literacy during slavery. We have subtitles in each part.
Can you tell us what you want to show in your second part? What do you want to prove or to show in the second part? The threat, other threat to what? To the establishment or to the institution of slavery or?
Okay, in that part, the first subtitle is literacy as a distinction. Okay, the second part, literacy and communication, because I have pictures that prove that literate Muslims could communicate among them by writing, okay, or talking in Arabic, and it became to be a threat for the slaveholders because they could plot with that. Okay, that's what I explain later in the other part, literacy and freedom, in the third chapter. Okay, that's it.
think I get the point. I think you want to show how literate slaves, how literacy enabled slavery to be able to emancipate themselves or to free themselves, and how it gave them an asset compared to the other slaves who were not literate. Okay, and well, once again, I think it's very interesting. We have less than 5 minutes. Just to wrap up, I think it is very interesting. The ideals are here once again. Okay, but now it's all about how to structure the whole. Okay, how to organize the work in order to get a very important document, a very relevant one. Okay, and from what I can see, you want to deal with the whole period of slavery, before and up to slavery. And if you want to get the idea of Professor Ndongo, he also want to add that modern time American Muslims as well, especially because we know that with the history of slavery in America, even Islam, which was practiced by the nation of Islam, is an Islam which was very much destined to help them fight against their situation, against their predicament. Okay, we know about the history, for example, of Malcolm X. Okay, the Islam he at first converted to, which was given to him by the nation of Islam, and when he went to Mecca, for example, how he opened his eyes to the true reality of Islam, which was not about race, but which was about human being, humanity. So I think those are very important aspects. But you need to organize your work once again. Okay, you need to organize your work, and it's not easy. And I think that with the exchange you'll be having with us, with people who are willing to help you and exchange with you, I think you will finally get it done. Okay, so what are your last words before we finish?
My last word is just to say thanks to everybody for having me over here today. And what was the most important for me, it was not to teach you something that you have never known, but it was just to get feedbacks from you so I can improve myself and extend the ideas so that I can have a better writing of my dissertation. So thanks everybody. You can join me later so that we can work together, so you can help me improve the writing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ndongo, for accepting to be here today with us to share your research findings so far, and also once again the challenges you've been facing and you're still facing in this project. Thanks for having the courage and the willingness to be with us here today. And I would like also to thank once again all the partners, the West African Research Center for once again providing the place, the technical support, and also the American and Caribbean Studies Lab. Thanks also to the public and for all who have given their contributions and suggestions. I think that next month we will deal more with methodology, so that some doctors or professors will give a lecture on methodology. Thank you very much.